24-25 का पेश किया गया था। एक तरीके से सबके लिए ड्रीम बजट है, सब सेक्शन के लिए और खास करके युवाओं के लिए और महिलाओं के लिए और अलग अलग राज्यों के लिए। जिस प्रकार से खास करके जो ईस्टर्न इंडिया जो इकोनॉमी के लिए थोड़ा सा पिछड़ा है, ईस्टर्न इंडिया एक इकोनॉमिक हब के रूप में उभर के आएगा और बहुत बड़ा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का काम अभी बिहार से लेकर के झारखंड, आंध्र प्रदेश और वेस्ट बंगाल, नॉर्थ ईस्ट का होने वाला है।
कुर्सी बचाते हैं उनके लिए बजट है। एनडीए वाला जो है उसका साथ नीतीश कुमार और आंध्र प्रदेश का उनको सेव करने के लिए, उनको पास में रखने के लिए इसका बजट है। ये इंडिया का बजट नहीं है, देश के लिए बजट नहीं है।
There was no mention of Manrega. There was no mention or insufficient mention of any steps taken to improve the income of the ordinary person. We have seen far too little from the government when it comes to taking care of the severe income disparities in this country. Job creation, there was a token gesture made towards that, but unfortunately very short on specifics. And I personally welcome only one provision, which is this abolition of the tax on angel investors. I myself had recommended it to Shri Arun Jaitley more than 5 years ago. Finally, it has happened. I'm glad that's being done. We must have more investment coming in to generate more jobs. But otherwise, I find very little in terms of any good creative ideas when it comes to generating more jobs in our economy and more opportunities for young people and for those at the bottom of the pyramid to improve their incomes. We will have to study the budget in much more detail, but I would say it's an underwhelming budget.
This budget has more or less copied the Congress constitution, Congress manifesto, and main important thing is about the Yuva Nidhi, which Rahul Gandhi ji has in the Bharat Jodo Nyaya Yatra, he has evolved it, and he promised that through the apprenticeship for the first year of the youngsters who are completing, we will give 10 crore jobs to those youngsters with a 8,500 rupees monthly stipend. This government has announced it as 5,000 rupees per youngster who is going to be in the apprenticeship. This shows that this government has copied the ideas of Mr. Rahul Gandhi ji.
नायडू साहब से और नीतीश साहब से डरा हुआ बजट है, बाकी कुछ नहीं है। ना देश के लिए ना नौजवान के लिए, चिकित्सा खाली कर दिया। कोई मतलब ऐसा बजट है जिसके अंदर पूरा डर परिलक्षित हो रहा है।
अभी कह रहा है कि हम 4 करोड़ नौकरी देंगे, ये देंगे, तो 10 साल में कई ठो नौकरी दी। और बिहार के पलायन का क्या हुआ? एक यूनिवर्सिटी आप पटना यूनिवर्सिटी नहीं बना पाए। पहले भी डबल इंजन की सरकार थी, दोनों किंग मेकर रहे हैं। आज नीतीश कुमार जी किंग मेकर हैं, तो आपको विशेष पैकेज भी नहीं दिया। अभी आप बजट में कह रहे थे कोसी जो सरकार मांगेगी, कोसी सीमांचल के बाढ़ के लिए, तो सरकार क्या मांगेगी? ये डिमांड तो हमारा है ही, हाई डैम को आप दीजिए, एयरपोर्ट पर दीजिए। ये डिमांड है कि जितनी बंद पड़ी फैक्ट्रियां उस पर आप दीजिए। तो बिहार इंडेक्स में दुनिया का सबसे अब कब? अब गुजरात को और दीजिएगा, किसको दीजिएगा?
Okay, my guest this evening, Madhavan Narayan, is a senior journalist, tracks the economy. Thank you, Madhavan, for joining us. S. Ravi continues to be with us, and Ameya Prabhu is president of the Indian Chamber of Commerce, joining us on the broadcast as well. Ameya Prabhu, first to you, the government is looking very clearly, the government is looking with great hope towards the industry, towards the private sector to create more jobs. There is something called an employment-linked incentive that has been announced as well. It seems like a good idea on paper. Will it work?
I think firstly, I would like to commend the government because this is a government that listens. They had invited the Chambers of Commerce a few weeks before the budget to meet the FM, and a lot of the recommendations that we've given, I've actually seen them in the budget today, including the customs duty rationalization, etc. I think this employment linked incentive is a good idea because, given the advent of technology, the amount of jobs a dollar of capital creates today is a lot lesser than it used to create, say, even 10 years ago, and certainly a lot lesser than it created 20 years ago. So I think it's very important, even from the safety of a business or even from the longevity of India, that the jobs get created for the people, because it's, ultimately, as long as, because we have increasing number of youths who are becoming engineers, doctors, and highly educated workforce. So it's important that they find gainful employment. So I think it's also a job, a social obligation of business to create to create employment. So I think it's a good idea, and I'm certain that business and industry will support that.
Okay, Amey, I asked you this question in the context of the fact that not too long ago, one of the big changes that the government of India had made as far as India's economic landscape is concerned is slash the corporate tax. Now, why had the government slashed the corporate tax? Because they felt it would give the industry incentive to create more employment. Did it do that? The jury is still out on that. Didn't happen, which is why I asked you whether you think it'll happen this time.
I think government has to try various, see, because there are various, of course, see, cutting tax is a fiscal option for the government, right? But at the same time, technological disruption is going at such a rapid pace. Industry also has to, adapt the latest technology which they can, so that we can compete with the global market. So I think one has to attempt, because I think ultimately the end goal of a government and also of business also should be for job creation and employment. So I think the fact that the government is trying various different policy measures, I think one should encourage it, and we have to work along with government to ensure that the outcome is met.
Okay, Madhavan Narayan, in the last 2-3 years, a lot of big numbers have been thrown at us. A lot of big schemes have been announced. My question to you is simple. I want the big takeaways, but I want to start with personal income tax, because that is what most viewers will be interested in. कि हमारा इसमें भला हुआ या नहीं हुआ?
See, I think a personal income tax pay, if you see I have to study the entire tax proposals because in detail. But if you see, one of the things which they've increased the standard deduction, which I think is a good thing, for the common taxpayer. They've also increased the limit from 1 lakh to 1,25,000 for the LTCG, long-term capital gains exemption, which again is a good thing for the middle class. Overall, even from an ease of doing business, they've made it easier for LLPs to be winded up, which is a good thing. The angel tax on the F56(2), which is what a lot of the industry had asked for. Again, one has to read the fine print, because we've all heard the budget speech. But once once we go through the fine print, we'll have a better idea. Of course, the one question one might ask is that both the income on STT has gone up on FNO, which of course will also reduce speculation, which has been an issue in the markets recently. But again, and the other thing, which from a tax perspective, if you look at, they've also increased long-term capital gains from 10 to 12.5, and also short-term capital gains. But again, my view on that is that, a lot of people have made money in the markets in the last couple of years. And if you can contribute towards the growth of the country, I think one should do that. So I'm not very discouraging of that.
Okay, Ameya, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much. Mr. Narayan, would you want to come in? The big takeaways for you as far as personal income tax is concerned, because the finance minister is telling us that at least people who earn below 15 lakh rupees, they will have 17,500 rupees extra in their hands every year, courtesy tax savings under the new slabs. Do you see that happening? Is it just the beginning of better things to come? Or is this something that has been done to encourage more people to come under the tax bracket? You'll have to unmute yourself, Mr. Narayan.
I'll come back.
No issues.
Hello, can you hear me now? Yeah.
I was about to say, I can hear you. I was about to say, bolti band ho gayi after hearing the budget.
Yeah, but that's a good one. Middle class ke liye, I think, Shreya, there has been a marginal carrot. Just to say, oh, let me not I won't let you say there is nothing for me. So there is something, a lollipop for the middle class. There is nothing significantly higher for the middle class, unless you're talking about a new emerging middle class, which is what you could call a neo working class. You know, the kind of education and skilling related expenditure is huge. And there is some very interesting development on how people can get easier loans or more loans if you want to study in India. A lot of middle class people are now going abroad to study. Now, e-vouchers for education have been introduced, and loan terms have been made easy if you study in a domestic institution. So if you're studying, let's say, in a private Indian university, you might get more incentive to prevent you. So I was going to joke that this budget is overall Nehruvian in content and RSS in intent, careful in globalization and very heavy on participation. Let me explain how. A lot of the expenditure, whether it's on education, whether it is on rural infrastructure, and even on building Amravati as a new capital for Andhra Pradesh, you will find there is a fine print, which is officially it is in line with the Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. And what it means is that aapka saath ka bhi zaruri hai, which means that you have to bring something to the table. Whether it's an employer adding new employees under a provident fund, incentivized formalization of labor, whether it is Amravati talking about getting multilateral funding with central government support, which means that you will have to first go to Singapore. Chandrababu Naidu first goes to Singapore, has negotiations, and then comes and tells Mr. Modi's government, look, I've got this tied up. And therefore, it is a constant matchmaking between private initiative and government incentive. That is something I've noticed as a fine print running throughout the big, if you take away the direct benefit transfer, which is a known story, a lot of the news stories are what I call hook stories. Ki there is a, tum bhi ye karo, tabhi hum ye karenge. Sabka saath, sabka vikas. So that is one thing I've noticed. As far as the middle class is concerned, the education part of it is actually a huge boost. But which basically means you got to put your head down, plan your education. There's a lot of skilling initiatives in what I call the lower half of the educated pyramid, like more ITIs instead of IITs. You know, in India, we have typically a top-heavy education system. People keep talking about IITs, but who's going to work in the factories if you have IITians? There's going to be ITI walas. So that emphasis is there, which is actually a good thing for the long term. Again, similarly for medium and small enterprises, the same thing is there. But if you're talking simply from the salaried professional point of view, it means that what you get by way of income taxation may get taken away if you make some extra money from your mutual funds in a long-term capital gain in order to, let us say, buy that car you always wanted or go for that foreign trip you always wanted. You know, all these mutual funds advise कि तुम्हारा goal क्या है, and then say mutual fund सही है. But between the sahi hai and the goal kya hai, you may have to pay some long-term capital gains, which is 12.5% instead of the 10% it was earlier. So if you're going to be just saving your salary with a long-term asset like a home loan or something, it's a great budget for you or a good budget for you, if not great. But if you're going to have some slightly more, what I call upper middle class spending, such as a foreign holiday or a foreign education for your children, or let us say buying that sedan instead of that smaller car, in that case, you'll have to shell out more by way of, alongside GST, you'll have to shell out some of the long-term capital gains. So this is not a budget without catch. Okay, let me say something that is not going to be discussed anywhere today, but I think it is a hidden time bomb. On the one hand, it's raining money, okay, especially for rural areas, which is good for consumer goods companies or employees of consumer goods manufacturing companies. But if the expenditure is not properly staggered, you know, it's a catch-22 situation. If the expenditure remains on paper without the sabka saath, it means that jobs do not get created in sufficient quantity. On the other hand, if the expenditure is not properly staggered, the finance minister began her speech by saying the core inflation or the non-food inflation is only 3.1%. Sounds good. But you know, food inflation has a political quality. It's often, an economist's idea of inflation is not the housewives or the middle class professionals' idea of inflation. So if you end up spending more on food because there's an undercurrent, because the MSP for farmers has been raised, rural expenditure has been raised, there's going to be a demand pull as well as a cost push on the food grains. Now, what it means is that if you get 5,500 rupees from tax gains, what does it mean if you end up paying more for your ordering online? In fact, yesterday I ordered online and I found that for 4 chapatis, for 60 rupees, you end up paying 150 because there is a platform fee, there is a restaurant charge, and in some cases there is a delivery fee. These are
Correct.
hidden costs in the system. So if you're very careful on the lower end of the system, where you mind your food budget, where you take care of the fact that you're building long-term assets like a home, then it's a good budget. But if you want to just be a little bit more consumerist, watch out. That's my takeaway there. GST तो होता ही है, ऊपर से आपका long-term gain भी लगेगा.
Correct. Can I just get in the tax expert here? Mr. S. Ravi has been with us since morning. He was fairly hopeful of many things happening. Not many things have happened, but one of the things that has happened is under the new tax regime, there is a rejig of slabs, as it were. Mr. Ravi, you continue to be with us. Do some math for us. So just quickly, I think I'm repeating myself for the 5th time now, but the fact is, honestly, this is the only thing I was looking forward to in the budget. 0 to 3 lakh rupees, if that is how much you're earning, you have to pay 0 income tax. 3 to 7, 5% income tax. 7 to 10 lakh rupees, 10% income tax. 10 to 12 lakh rupees, 15% income tax. And 12 to 15 lakh rupees, 20% income tax. And 15 lakh rupees se upar, you have to pay 30% income tax. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the government could have been slightly more generous in the last 2 income tax slabs. If you were to ask me, Mr. Ravi, fact is कि आप ये 10 to 15% कर सकते थे for 15% income tax, and at least for those between 15 to 20%, you could have had a 15% income tax and 20% income tax, and above 20 lakhs could have been 30%. This was something that one expected from the budget, because if you live in cities like Bangalore, if you live in cities like Delhi, in Mumbai, if 15 lakh rupees is what? 15 lakh rupees is you're taking home, what, 1.25 lakh rupees? That is before tax. Then you pay a tax of 30%. You have your EMIs to pay, you have your ghar ka kharcha, you have bijli ka bill, you are sending your kid to school. What is your saving? Next to nothing. The government could have been a little more generous as far as this slab is concerned.
So in the pre-budget show itself, I had said that I expected the last one, that is the 30%, 15 lakhs and above, to be at least 20-25%, 5% lesser. And that is one thing that the government could have done, that the budget could have carried. But I think the rationale, if you look at the finance minister's rationale, what she has focused is the maximum number of taxpayers have come between the bracket of 10 to 15 lakhs. If you look at the maximum number of taxpayers, they come between 10 to 15 lakhs. So that is where I think the whole focus has been, and you see the benefit that they have derived out of that is from there only. So this has been the primary focus. So they have not looked at 15 lakhs and above at all. And I'll tell you what you stated very clearly. It's very clear that nothing can be saved out of this if a person has to provide for education, to provide for medical, for everything. It's a very difficult proposition. And that is why I feel, as far as the last slab, they could have done a lot better, because this goes to nearly the tax of the super rich. So I think this is where I feel that this one part could have been addressed better. But I see this is a start, because last year nothing of this sort happened, and at least there is a start, and that is what I personally feel. Now the long-term capital gain, that is another thing which has 1.25. Maybe it'll help in the mid segment of housing, not in Delhi and in places like Mumbai, you don't get any house of that value. So this may not be relevant, but it will be very relevant to citizens who are in the B towns and C towns and the smaller cities. So this will really be of help to them. So this is what I personally feel. And the pension, of course, and I was mentioning about the revision of the pension scheme. The new pension scheme, the finance minister has promised that she'll be remodifying it. So we'll have to see what will be the exemption there also. So these are the things that will add up. You know, if you add up all these together, it will come to about 20, 25, 22, 23,000 rupees. I have not got the maths right because I have to assess the whole thing. But that will be the benefit if you look at people who have house who are selling, those who are in the pension scheme, so and those who have adopted the new pension scheme, and the employer's contribution also she has increased. The exemption. So just to promote the new pension scheme. So all these have to be added. We have to see how many people are attracting this. So that is one calculation we have to do. But on the first hand thought, the benefit should be around 22,000.
Okay, so that's the rough calculation. The calculation that the finance minister has given us is 17,500 rupees extra in the hands of taxpayers. Can I then ask you, because the entire effort, if you look at personal income taxes, the entire effort is that the government wants all of us to shift from the old tax regime to the new tax regime. About 60% people have already shifted to the new tax regime. Now, if I'm someone who earns, say, 20 lakh rupees and I have a home loan, is it better for me, if you do the math, is it better for me to stick to the old tax regime or migrate to the new tax regime?
It will be always better in the old tax regime because the deductions are there. So very, very clearly the deductions are there. So the new old tax regime is better in that sense. Only thing is, as I mentioned earlier also, the flexibility of the new tax regime is you have to weigh the difference between the benefit and what you can earn out of your whatever little saving you got, how much can you earn out of it. So that is, so if you can deploy it in the market, maybe you can get a better return with all the performance of the market in the last couple of years. So that could be a better return than that. So I think it's all individual driven. It's based on the profile of the person. But if you ask me a very generic statement, I would say yes, the old regime is better for at least people who have to pay, who have a housing loan. So I think that is better. The another thing that is there is
this budget in.
One thing that you must
Go ahead.
see, you must see the STT that has been introduced, the higher tax, is primarily to prevent people from speculating, especially in the forward and derivative market. And see, if you look at India's credit profile versus equity profile, cash to credit, which is one of the highest globally. So the credit profile is very high. So I think in order to ensure that the markets don't react in a very adverse way, and there are smaller people who don't lose money, I think this corrective step is being taken. That is my view.
Okay,